This is a public health problem. People go to the ER for headaches. It's the third leading cause of ER visits, of ED visits for women of reproductive age. So with that, Matt, I'll let you chime in.
You're not passionate about this at all.
No, not at all, right?
I can tell this is like the least exciting thing in your repertoire, Julie.
These are my people. This is my chronic disease.
Okay.
Finally.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eugene Shatsman, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's episode of the Power Hour. I am, as always, honored to host optometry's longest running and most listened to podcast, and I invite you to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. So I got a lot of positive feedback about doing a panel episode. It's kind of like you get double the expertise in the same time frame, right? So today I decided to bring in two very interesting experts on a very interesting topic, emerging subspecialties. Initially, I was going to call this the headache or the migraine episode, but it turned into something much more interesting. My two guests today describe solutions that exist in the marketplace today, and people have built subspecialties in their practices already, and they have prospective benefits to huge patient populations, and yet neither subspecialty is popular enough to find in the typical eye care practice. So I invited Dr. Julie Helmus. She owns Helmus Optometry in Davis, California. It's a large practice, multiple ODs, thousands of patients. They're growing quickly, and they're also a pretty innovative practice. She added Avalux migraine glasses to the practice less than a year ago, and she talks about her experience in catering to this underserved migraine population. Also joining us is Matt Rosner. He's from Neurovisual Medicine Institute. They have a home practice in Michigan, but they also train practices to add neurovisual subspecialty to their practice. What I found surprising, and it may surprise you, is how big the patient population is for both subspecialties. And I asked both Matt and Julie to talk about the challenges, but also the must-haves in order to successfully add a subspecialty like theirs. We also get into the numbers, the implementation, the things to watch out for, and the differences in their approach. More than anything, we shed some light on the opportunity for other practice owners, and hopefully this episode gives you a chance to think about whether these emerging specialties or something else could be a subspecialty that you want to add to your practice, but gives you the tools or at least the mindset that you need to consider this in your practice. So, as always, I just wanted to remind you that I absolutely want to hear from you. You can find me at eugeneshatsman.com or on the Power Hour website. My goal in having these conversations is to add value to you. And while I'm excited for everyone tuning in, I am most grateful about the people who have written in, the ones who have asked me to cover a specific topic or address a question or just plain connect. So, again, I want this to be interactive. Go to eugeneshatsman.com or go to the Power Practice website and drop me a line. And now let's jump into today's episode. Welcome everybody to another exciting episode of the Power Hour Season 12. With me today is an amazing panel, Dr. Julie Helmus and Matt Rosner. Julie Helmus, I'll introduce both of you momentarily, but I just want to give a preface to our listeners that this show is focused on emerging trends and innovation. And so with this in mind, both of you are incredible at pivoting, at being flexible, at being business owners. And I think we could learn a little bit from just pure mindset when it comes to bringing new specialties into our practice. But most importantly, I would love for both of you to talk a little bit about your background, a little bit about where you're at right now, because it's going to allow us to get a chance to see how it is that you get to a place where you're the leading innovators in the country for the subspecialties that you've chosen to really talk about here today. So, Dr. Helmus, let's start with you. Give a little bit of background about your practice, and then really jump into this role that you've adopted as truly the earliest innovator of Avalux and the clinical director.
Awesome. First of all, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you. I'm stoked for the Power Practice. And yeah, I'm an optometrist. I'm an eye doctor. I'm in practice. I'm in clinic. I'm helping patients, and I'm also, managing a large team. We have one single location in Davis, California, and my practice, my claim to fame, if you haven't heard, is both my mom and dad are retired optometrists. So I've had the privilege of piggybacking on their foundation and their success and growing Helmus Optometry. So we're up to about around 26 full-time employees, and I now have 4 associates. And we offer a variety of subspecialties. So like many practices, we're doing complex contact lenses like sclerals and ortho-K. We're getting into dry eye and aesthetics. And then the recent one is our migraine center. I'm probably missing a few there, Eugene, but I'm always looking to differentiate the practice, try something new, add that energy and zest to my team, and just stand out for patients and address a need. And that's how we got involved with Avalux, prescribing Avalux migraine and light sensitivity lenses.
And it's interesting. I want people to just appreciate what you've built, because first of all, I think a second generation practice is always a huge challenge. A lot of people listening are probably dreaming of, either participating in that someday with their kids, but there's always so many stories of that gone awry. So, but you took something that was working and got it to work even better. Just talk, how many ODs, how many, maybe how many patients do you see, just so that people understand the scale of the operation that you've built?
Yeah, sure. Well, I used to think actually second gen was fancy, and then I met a 5th generation optometrist down in SoCal just to provide that perspective. But yeah, the family model, it's not without its struggles. Helmus Optometry, we've been in town. I'm 39. The practice has been in town for 37 years. So I have grown up alongside
Literally,
the practice.
yes.
Yes. So, in this small town, small, it's 70,000. It's a little college town. Like, I don't have any anonymity. And then, patients were used to things happening a certain way. And so it's about patient education every time we do something new. For example, now Optos imaging is mandatory. Well, we get that pushback. Well, it wasn't, I didn't have to do it, previously. And so it's kind of about setting the expectation, over communicating that surround sound mentality to patient. Like, this is a new sheriff in town, and this is how I'm doing things. And absolutely, we've lost patience over it, but we've also created even more loyalty. And I hear positive feedback every day. I love the changes you've made, and I have done like nothing short of gutting the family practice, system by system, from physical, like a remodeling, from going from 3 exam lanes to 6 exam lanes, adding, we didn't have an OCT when I joined the practice, so adding all the tools, topography, A-scan for our myopia management, and just trying to, again, recognize that I'm in this awesome position where I can build upon a huge foundation. I have that loyalty. I have the name recognition. I have trust of patients. Literally, they're like, your name is on the outside of the building. I'm like, right, that's me. And let's move on to your eye exam and address your problems, right? So, always bringing it back to the patient. I can talk about my story all day, but it's all about like, what is the need of our market? What do our patients need? And that's how myopia management was born, right? Like, now we're diving into aesthetics, which is super exciting. But again, today the focus is on migraine and headaches. And
Yeah.
I'll let Matt chime in here.
No, so I think that's great. And we'll come back to you in a second, because it's really difficult in some cases building a specialty at scale. And so we're going to jump into some of those challenges that you've had. Matt, you are the chief strategist of practice growth at Neurovisual Medicine Institute. It's a mouthful, but the impact is way bigger than the words I just said. Talk a little bit about what Neurovisual Medicine Institute does, and talk a little bit about what a chief practice growth strategist does.
Yeah. So first of all, Eugene, thanks for having me here. A cool conversation with a great group of people. So just a snippet, my background, it starts in hospitality. So I have a design background. I ended up in hospitality, cooking, and then doing restaurant consulting, and then ended up consulting for my parents' optometric clinic in Metro Detroit, Michigan, which is how I got my foot in the door in the industry to begin with. And so that
you're almost a second generation optometrist.
So I sometimes say I'm third generation in the industry because my grandfather was also an optometrist. So however we slice it, we're all winning here today.
Okay, so talk about what neurovisual medicine does.
Yeah, so neurovisual medicine is it's a new clinical system designed to treat neurological and vestibular symptoms using primarily microprism. And it's also a business platform that we've developed to enable practices to create a whole profit center around the functional and binocular vision specialties and care from the front office to the bottom line and everywhere in between. So that's a little bit about what we do at a very high level.
Yeah, and we're going to zoom into these specialties in a second. But the reason I wanted to do this episode was because these are both emerging. I hear people talk about dry eye all the time. I hear people talk about myopia management all the time. Sclerals. They're certainly not old news. There's lots of things to figure out. But I'm wondering what's the newest stuff, right? And helping patients with symptoms like headache, like migraines. I think it's something that many optometrists want to do in their practice, but they've had a challenge. They haven't had necessarily the toolkit. So, Julie, I'll turn it over to you. Talk a little bit about Avalux and how you found Avalux, and then really, why it's been such a breakthrough for your practice.
Great question. I'm like sort of a serial conference attendee. I feel like there's always something I learn. I've had to get my staff behind the fact that I'm going to leave constantly, and I always come back and bring a new system, a new technology. I think the challenge is like not overwhelming and exhausting my staff with too much change, so they kind of keep me in check. So yeah, I discovered Avalux at actually a great conference put on by Perk. And the first thing I thought is, oh my God, for years, I've been in practice for 9 years, patients have asked me about light sensitivity. And everyone recognizes the term migraine. Like to me, it has way more name recognition than myopia and presbyopia. And I mean, so many patients who live with migraine experience light sensitivity. They actually report it's the most common symptom after head pain. So this is a big deal.
What percentage of patients have migraine, Julie?
So that's another great thing is that the demographics for this are right. It is 1 in 3 women. It's 9% of men. It's the second leading cause of disability worldwide, second to low back pain, which blew my mind. And I mean, it's such a common problem, especially for my people, which is women, productive, women of reproductive age, right? So women between the ages of 20 and 50. And like, I am the classic migraine patient. I've been dealing with migraine headaches for 25 years. Like I'm a busy working mom, and patients constantly are like, I have to wear my sunglasses inside. Or how many times have I heard this? I cannot count. They say during an attack, I'm confined to a dark room. Like they can't look at their computer. They can't cook dinner. They can't go to work. And likewise, we used to have staff calling out for migraine headaches all the time. I can name 3 staff right now on my team of 25 that live with migraine headaches. And so recognizing that this is a chronic condition, a chronic painful condition, and there is no cure, and light plays a huge role. And we are the number one providers who patients bring up light sensitivity to. And, there's this old technology, this FL41 filter. It's bright pink. It attracts a lot of unwanted attention. And that's like a legacy filter. So my concern is that when optometrists hear migraine headaches, they just dismiss it like, oh, I tried to treat patients with the FL41 filters and maybe it helped a few, but like they never made any money off of it. They never got any referrals off of it. Like patients, and Matt, I know has lots to say about filters, but the reason I like Avalux, it's not a tint. It's a precision light filter, right? So it really builds off of that tech. And
for anyone not watching on YouTube, Julie just put on her Avalux glasses. So I really hope that you all go back to YouTube and watch this exact moment.
Well, I don't want to sound like a saleswoman here. I am a medical advisor for Avalux.
You're not even paid though. You're not even paid by Avalux.
I'm not paid. No, I'm just super passionate because this has been working for my patients. And I feel like I'm seeing that we can ease suffering. I'm not saying we're curing migraine headaches. We are not. There is no cure. But these patients, I mean, again, like we all know people who live with migraine headaches. It's just that prevalent and common. And the women, like that's my coveted population, because let's acknowledge that optometrists, like we inhabit this retail space. And women are more likely to spend in our optical. Like they're more consistent with their healthcare. They're the keepers of the family schedule. Like anything that solves a problem that women deal with is a great thing to offer in your practice. So really just briefly, and then I'll turn it over to Matt. Avalux lenses, they have a little bit of a hue. They block 97% of blue, amber, and red light. So I want to pause there because we all know patients are coming and asking for blue blockers, right? They're concerned about blue light. Like that was like the marketing campaign of the decade, right? I'm constantly having to tell them like, you're not going to go blind from blue light. Like the sun is the #1 source for blue light. If you really want to up your blue light blocking game, go for Avalux. But technically, we're talking about headaches and migraines. So I took a little tangent. But so they're blocking blue, amber, and red light, and they're allowing green light to enter. And green light has been shown to be really soothing for patients who live with migraine. So, big picture, it's not curing migraine. It's just going to let patients get through their day. And, a little quote here, or stat, I should say, 97% of Avalux users can resume their daily activities. So I tell a patient, like, look, you get your migraine glasses. If you can look at your phone, you can look at your computer, you've won. If you don't have to call out for work, you've won. Because there's this huge economic toll of migraine headaches. Like this is a public health problem. People go to the ER for headaches. It's the third leading cause of ER visits, ED visits for women of reproductive age. So with that, Matt, I'll let you chime in.
You're not passionate about this at all.
No, not at all, right?
I can tell. This is like the least exciting thing in your repertoire, Julie.
These are my people. This is my chronic disease. Like
Okay.
finally.
So to summarize, what you did in terms of building a migraine specialty in your practice is you brought on this Avalux brand, right? Or essentially these are lenses, right? That you can put in any glass.
Correct. Thank you.
These lenses help with the symptoms associated with migraine because they're treating the patients who are light sensitive through something that's not been available in the marketplace before, right?
Well said. Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
So I'm just summarizing what the specialty is. We're going to zoom in on the actual implementation of that specialty in a moment. Okay,
Awesome.
Matt, describe your specialty.
Okay, so 1 in 5 people suffer from binocular vision dysfunction, which is an umbrella term for all of the associated symptoms with binocular issues, right? And traditionally in optometry, at least in the 90s and through the early 2000s, eye misalignment wasn't a huge deal because anything that was under a certain amount of misalignment, or let's say subtle eye misalignment, wasn't a huge deal because we didn't know how to find it. We didn't know how to look for it. And the general zeitgeist, at least coming from the ophthalmological community, was anything below 2 diopters really wasn't something to be concerned about, right? And we look at prism kits from the 90s and into the early 2000s, there were no fractional units of prism. We had 1 diopter all the way up to 14 or 16, but there's this fractional area of prism and misalignment that is impacting symptoms and impacting patients on a daily basis to the tune of approximately over 60 million Americans deal with these symptoms, right? And so some of them are headache and migraine type symptoms, but we go way beyond that because the body is impacted in a really significant way with this subtle misalignment with BVD. And those symptoms look like dizziness, of course, headaches, anxiety, chronic neck pain, head tilt, gait imbalance, car sickness, motion sickness. I mean, the list really goes on. And part of the challenge is when we started doing this work in the mid-90s, there was no connection. There was no historical or research-based connection to any of these symptoms with eyes to a meaningful degree. If you asked most optometrists, can dizziness be caused by the eyes? They would say, show me the research. I don't see the research. It's not there. But what we found is as we started treating these patients, initially being referred from an ENT who was seeing dizzy patients, who was also a patient who had vertical heterophoria, or that vertical eye misalignment, he was finding that there were two cohorts in his ENT clinic. There were patients who came in with dizziness, got better from the treatments he was providing, and there was a second cohort who, with the treatments he offered, their symptoms weren't touched. And so immediately he thought, I wonder if this might be caused by a visual issue, just like his were. And so he ended up sending them to Dr. Debbie Feinberg, one of our founders, and our chief medical director. And really, it was a question of, can you help these dizzy patients? So as we continued to go forward, headaches and migraines ended up becoming a key part of that, because as researchers, we'd always ask, okay, is it dizziness or is it headaches? And the challenge was, the answer was yes, it was both. And so a lot of these symptoms that we're talking about in terms of especially headache and migraine are almost never alone. There are almost always comorbid symptoms or conditions that patients are experiencing. Most of them don't even mention it to their optometrist, because why would I mention motion sickness to my optometrist? Why would I mention, gait instability or dizziness to my optometrist? Like, that's the other doctor across the street. And so we're working to really build this awareness, both from a sort of clinical standpoint with the research that we've been doing over the last 10 years, but also from a patient standpoint, to let them know that there is this cluster of symptoms. They happen for, over 60, it's estimated 60 million Americans on a daily basis. They are disabled, oftentimes, or at least impeded from living a normal daily life. And there's a really simple solution. So the solution we offer and that we work with and help practices achieve is a systematic approach to measuring subtle eye misalignment, and then using microprism and tints and filters to help reduce those symptoms. And on average, we're able to help patients up to 80%, on average, 80% symptom relief by the end of this course of care that we've developed, which only takes about 8 weeks. So that's a little bit about sort of how the problem we're solving in the problem space we inhibit, and a very broad description of how we solve that for patients.
Okay, Matt. So, and I just want to clarify the number, because I asked Julie the same question. How many, you said 1 in 5 people have BVD, and how many are symptomatic? How many of them are actually like impeded from being able to, or it affects their life in a negative way?
Yeah, so that's the number. There's actually a larger number of patients that have some sort of eye misalignment, but they're not triggered by it. They can accommodate. Their visual systems are healthy and fit, and don't cause the patient to feel those symptoms, even though they might have a subtle eye misalignment. But it's 1 in 5, estimated 1 in 5 Americans that are actually feeling those symptoms to a level, a symptom burden high enough to warrant treatment, to warrant looking further into this and getting help.
Okay, so both of these specialties that we're talking about obviously have clout from a population standpoint, right? This isn't like 1 in 10,000 people. This is like, Julie, I heard you say 1 in 3 women of reproductive age, right? That's a massive population, and then 9% of men, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of it's kind of surprising to me that people haven't built a specialty around this before. But
Right.
now that we're, that's our job, we educate now. So let's talk about how you did it. So what did you try, and what did you learn? What mistakes did you make, Julie, when you brought Avalux into your practice?
So yeah, when you start a subspecialty, there's a few universal steps that you take. I mean, your reps can help with staff training, and then of course, like setting pricing, adding to your fee slip, adding drop downs in your EHR. In this case, partnering with a lens lab, and we have a lot more options with Avalux now. Major lens labs, including Cherry and Midland. And then more staff training, because as a practice owner, life is just staff training forever and ever and ever, and retraining. And then, of course, there's marketing. And so there's internal marketing. So whether you're pulling a CPT code for everyone who's been diagnosed with migraine headaches previously, or you're doing, your own text messaging or email blast campaigns to leverage that internal population of patients, because we know that patients who have already purchased from us are more likely to buy from us in the future. It's
That-
easy to sell things. Oh yeah, so go ahead, Eugene.
But
the
do you
marketing
ask?
expert.
I mean, this is one part that kind of blew my mind, is that I think most optometrists ask throughout their kind of initial paperwork, they ask if a patient is experiencing headaches, right? They ask if a patient is experiencing
Actually, I know a stat on this. Less than 20% of optometrists ask their patients if they have a history of migraine. There's a little bit of a disconnect here because most optometrists are confident that they are identifying patients with migraine, but less than 20% ask, right? And very few of them actually use a validated screening tool. And so that's one of the things we incorporated is, emphasizing with our medical assistants that they need to ask every single patient. It's not just, what any health problems that you're dealing with. It's specifically, we want to know about diabetes. And now we want to ask every single patient, 10 out of 10 patients, are migraines or light sensitivity impacting your life? And we definitely add in the light sensitivity component. That's really, really important. And so, yeah, so back to the subspecialty, I mean, then your marketing. And then here's what I did wrong. I've made a lot of mistakes as a practice owner. I think one of my strengths is that I fail quickly and enthusiastically, and I don't let it hold me back. But one thing I think we did wrong was we priced it too high. And you really want to make sure with your patients, with your staff, with your team of optometrists, and I have 4 associates, is that I wish we had set the price point a little bit lower to just gain, to get those first 10 migraine patients off and running and to really gain confidence, especially for my associates. Because, a common pushback when you get a subspecialty, and remember, one of the reasons we love subspecialties is because that they are often cash pay, right? And so we will get that pushback on cost. And of course, we all have talking points about that. It's about communicating the value, how it's going to make an impact in the patient's life, and emphasizing, your payment plan models if needed. But that first impression is powerful. And I feel that some of my associates kind of told themselves, oh, I'm not going to emphasize this because patients are just going to say no on cost. And that's kind of a common issue with optometrists is not selling. And so we need to prescribe. So I wish I had set pricing a little bit lower to begin with. And I mean, you just fine tune these things as you go. We're doing a lot more staff incentives. So we're actually doing a free frame for patients who buy Avalux lenses. Now that's limited to our in-house frame line. So it's not, a gorgeous Prada frame, right? So we've learned and we've adapted, and then motivating the staff. And, that's going to depend on what you can offer in terms of your budget. Again, ask reps for help. But for right now, in terms of our optical team, we have 8 opticians. If they do 15 Avalux pairs a month, we're going to take them out for manis and pedis. So I've budgeted $400 for, 8 opticians to each get a mani pedi, $50 each. And then if the entire team, if we do 90 pairs in 90 days, which is aggressive, but I think with our new free frame promotion, we can hit that. Then I'm going to give them all a paid day off, close the clinic. And we're aiming for December 23rd because randomly December 23rd lands on a Monday this year. And that way we get 5 days off during the Christmas holiday.
Really cool. Yeah. And quick question, so you said you get pushback from a patient as cost, but the other thing, and I think this is somewhat universal when adding a subspecialty, is the whole idea of, okay, but no one's told me about this before. So is this even real? Is this going to work? I don't have a migraine right now. How am I confident that that investing this is going to help me in 2 weeks when I actually have a migraine?
Yeah, that's something we also struggled with at the beginning because we were an early adopter. So I think we were the 12th practice in the US to start prescribing Avalux lenses. So at first we were kind of messing around with this library of fitovers. So we would collect a deposit of $350, send the patients home with a fitover of Avalux, and we have 9 in our practice. So patients can try them in the gallery in the exam room. And I will say a lot of patients say, oh my God, wow, right away. They're like, this is soothing. This is relaxing. I had one patient say, wow, my eyes feel like they're on vacation. So patients can experience it, and that can help close the sale on the same day. But for those patients, yeah, who don't have a migraine presently, we're like, rent these, take it home, try it for 1 to 2 weeks. But I didn't like that because we were having to track these fitovers, we were having to recall the patient, and then anytime, you're not closing the sale the same day, you're potentially missing out. So now we have a 90-day satisfaction guarantee, and Avalux has changed that. And so that's been fantastic. That change has been super positive.
Okay, so we're going to come back to what 90 pairs in sales actually means to an office in terms of revenue. Matt,
Yeah.
I want to turn to you and say, okay, so Prism is probably not an optometrist's favorite class in school, right? Like I don't think that anyone says, you know what, that was it. So I don't know, like is this hard? How hard is it to adapt? And then really again, what's the biggest challenge of adopting this into adopting your subspecialty into the practice?
Yeah, I spent 3 months earlier this year talking to optometrists, asking them. We did a little word association. I said Prism, and then we said what they, we waited to hear what they said. But what was interesting, and we did the same thing with binocular vision, and with a challenge with this area of optometry historically, is that optometrists don't get a lot of exposure or the right kind of exposure and education in optometry school. I mean, you talk to administrators of optometry schools, the amount of stuff they have to cover now that scope has expanded over the last 2 or 3 decades, is massive. It's understandable that people aren't fully comfortable with each area of optometry and each specialty. And so I think one of the opportunities is knowing that 20% of people in the US and more broadly have this condition, but only 2.5 or 3% of optometrists actually specialize in this area of either binocular vision, functional vision, vision therapy. I mean, it's sort of this cluster of functional and neurooptometry. The demand to supply ratio is massively in the optometrist's favor from an opportunity standpoint. And so, the reason that most clinicians don't offer it up front or specialize in it is because they never had enough foundation to be confident in prescribing Prism. And when we work with clinicians, one of the things they always say is, see, I knew how to do this test, but I didn't know what to do with the data. And so the tests are familiar, but extrapolating the data and knowing how to prescribe Prism is something that really isn't taught in school. And so when it comes to actually taking the clinical knowledge and making a specialty out of it, we work with every practice to identify those key players in their practice who need to be present in order to make this a success. And we say it takes a village to raise a specialty, right? And so it's true. And it also takes one sort of staff person who isn't fully bought in or doesn't have the tools to succeed to massively slow down the start of a new specialty.
And I think, Julie, you've seen something similar in the Avalux integration, right? And I heard you say the same thing. It's like you got to get everybody trained, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's surround sound messaging, repeat training, and then identifying an in-practice champion. So in our case, it was a board certified optician, to really just be the point person, the person that as we exit the exam room, we're looking for, who can also be the source for, the point of contact with our Avalux rep, and then other, employees go to her with questions. So yeah, you want someone who's motivated and wants added responsibility, and connects with the cause. So in our case, Jessica, our ABO licensed optician, also lives with migraine headaches.
So Matt, in your case, do you need special equipment, special training? Do you have to do that?
Yeah, so you do need special equipment, but it's something we provide as an entire kit that comes with our training. And we train every clinician hands-on. It's a 5-day hands-on masterclass at our headquarter clinic in Michigan, where we see upwards of 100 neurovisual patients each week, prescribing microprisms and tints to almost all of them, because we sorted them beforehand. And Julie mentioned having a validated screening tool is so important. And when we don't ask about symptoms or conditions that patients might have that we might be able to treat, we completely miss the opportunity, one, to provide them that care and that relief, but two, to expand our scope within the patients we're already seeing. And so every practice we work with that brings this on board, the first thing they do with every single patient is add this validated screening tool to their intake, because the data they get gives them an almost certain score that will tell them if this patient is a good candidate for care. And that's how we know it's 20%, because we've taken primary care practices, people off the street, specialty care practices, and given them this BVDQ, this validated screening tool. And without fail, we see anywhere between 20 and 25% of people are at a high enough symptom threshold that it's not only that they get headaches or they get dizzy like once a month. This is like they get blurred vision at night on the highway. They get anxious on roller coasters. They don't like big open spaces like Walmart or a big open soccer field. And when you mention these to a person who's asymptomatic or who doesn't have these, it's like talking to someone who owns cats or who doesn't own cats and goes in the supermarket and never sees cat food, because that's not their audience. They're not looking for it. But if you talk to the 1 in 5 people and you say, hey, do you ever get sort of dizzy when you're going over bridges in your car? They say, how did you know? You say, well, do you ever look away when the action movie is like moving a little too fast and there's too much going on? You say, like, stop. Like, who told you all these things? And so because we've been able to see almost upwards of 45,000 patients across our network of clinics, we've aggregated this data. We've built tools specifically to help identify who these patients are, what they're struggling with, what their case history is. And we did a research study a couple of years ago, and we learned that the patients that we see that are everywhere, but the ones specifically in our clinic that came in for this care had been suffering for an average of 5 years and had seen an average of 7 different clinicians.
Wow.
For those symptoms. We're talking neurologists, ENTs, vestibular therapists, chiropractors, acupuncturists. So by the time they get to us, on average, they are suffering and they are almost out of hope. They are at the end of their rope and they are seeking an answer, which is different. And I want to just say it's different than most other optometric specialties, because we're usually looking for the problem that they don't feel or know about yet, and building awareness. For example, myopia, right? We have to sell the parent, we have to create FOMO, we have to tell them that in 10 years, this is going to be a really big deal for your kid, even though now it doesn't hurt. For this, as well as migraine headache, we're addressing a pain that's happening usually today. And it's a totally different psychology when we're interacting with the patient.
And that's why I wanted to do this episode, because now I'm going to get into the numbers. And I think it's so important to really kind of to realize that if you offer something that other people don't, people will travel, right? Like, how many patients did you say you guys see per week in the Michigan clinic?
Yeah, about 100.
100 patients with this neurovisual subspecialty, right? They're just for that. And ballpark, I'll zoom in on your stuff first. Ballpark, what's the revenue number per patient?
Anywhere from $1,500 to $1,900
Per patient.
per patient.
Okay. We're going to come back to what it takes to earn that in a second. Julie, you said you guys are aiming, and this is early in your adoption phase, right? It's been less than a year, I believe, for you guys. So you're aiming for 90 patients in a 2-month period, 60 days?
In 90 days. And we
90
want to
days,
do
okay.
one pair of Avalux every day. And
Okay.
Matt, just to clarify, that was both professional fees and materials.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, that's an incredible number. That's wow.
That's 100 a week. I just, like, I don't need to do the math for the audience, but that's a lot of money every week.
So it's worth noting that this is a course of care. There's 2 exams within that course of care. So in terms of the new patients we're seeing, and we talk about, revenue per new course of care. So half of those, I would say, are new.
Okay.
And then a quarter are annuals and a quarter are progress assessments who are going through that course of care and are initial patients. So yeah, it's not 1-to-1, but yeah.
Well, 50 a week times 52 weeks a year, that's still 2,600 patients with this subspecialty. And we're going to talk about how far they travel to come see you. But, again, you can do the math. So Julie, talk about the math on Avalux.
Well, I want to emphasize, though, that a lot of subspecialties, like, for example, when we're fitting a scleral lens or when we're doing myopia management, we need to see that patient multiple times. I mean, sometimes it's like 6 visits. And so you hear this really high revenue per patient metric, like $1,500 to $1,900 per patient, but you also need to divide that over this series of encounters, right? Because every time your provider is seeing that patient, they're not seeing another patient, which could then yield, in my practice, as an average of $540 per refraction, right? So the thing I like about Avalux, and maybe it's because I tend to be fast paced and fast moving, is that I often don't need to see my patient back again. Now, I'm happy to have them back for a status check in 3 months to see how Avalux has made a difference in their life and for their symptoms. And I'll bill a level 3 for that. But I don't need to, because I can prescribe Avalux at the time of their comprehensive eye exam. And so to get into our numbers, again, our average revenue per patient is about $540, and I'm 78% VSP. And so we have a huge managed care plan, which creates our own challenges, which is a different podcast, right? So I'm proud of that 540 metric. But my average revenue per patient for an Avalux patient is $980.
Wow.
And that is with often just 1 patient encounter. I don't need a follow-up visit. I don't need extra testing. All I need to do is I need to appropriately screen them, and I need to prescribe it. And I'm prescribing it. This is where we get into our multiple pair cells, because Avalux is often a second pair of glasses. The patient still needs their all-around glasses. They still need their sunglasses, which California, we're big on the second pair for sun protection. And then they're getting their Avalux, because most patients wear their Avalux glasses just part-time. Now, if you fall into the category of chronic migraine headaches, which is defined as 15 headache days per month over at least a 3-month period, then yes, then I'm saying you should wear your Avalux migraine glasses full-time. But that's where the clip is really great, and the chemistry clip I see is as the future of Avalux. I think that's going to be really, really strong, is that they're just going to be able to add a magnetic clip onto their existing glasses. And I do want to emphasize that they can put these lenses in any frame, right? They can put it in their Prada frames. Like, we're not sacrificing fashion. That's important. Remember, we're largely talking about women of that peak professional age. So, fashion is important too.
Yeah. So
Did I answer your question though?
You did. So $980 for your
Correct.
practice. Are your
Yes.
margins consistent? Meaning, are your margins better on the Avalux product or worse on your Avalux product?
They're more for progressive, like in general, than they are for single vision. They're more for the RX than they are for the clip-on or the fit-over. But
I mean,
yes,
just compared to your regular, if you were to sell a pair of non-Avalux versus Avalux, do you make the same margin or better on Avalux than you would in your typical lenses?
Well, because we don't bill Avalux, we tell patients we cannot bill this to your, vision care plan, your discount savings plan. The margins are dramatic. They're much, much better. So sidestepping, I'm always looking for a reason to sidestep those vision plans. And, that's where specialty comes in.
Well, right.
A lot of specialty.
And I think what's interesting, and I really do want to draw this difference, I think you hit the nail right on the head, is what's really interesting is that you're both talking about addressing a problem that's very prevalent. You're both talking about doing it in a way that isn't really common to address it in. you're both talking about having a practice champion. You're both talking about making sure that you've got all the training and that you've got a really good way to explain it to the patient. But the big difference between your two solutions is that you solve it without any extra chair time, Julie, and Matt solves it with a lot more chair time, but probably a lot more money as a result. And so you have to decide for your practice, what's your scarce resource? Is it chair time? If it's chair time and you want to help patients with migraine, okay, go with this. If it's maybe quality of patient and what's your biggest constraint, it might not be chair time. If it's not chair time, then maybe spend more time with the patient and get paid more for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, Matt, back to you. How far do people travel to come get this problem solved in your Michigan practice?
We've had people come from Oman, Greece, South Africa, Australia. I mean, we are like, when you Google anything about BVD, usually Dr. Debbie comes up somewhere in there. And so she's in this subset. I mean, for our specific practice, she is sort of like a mini celebrity within this BVD patient cohort. But if you ask, for any of the 50 practices, 50 plus practices around the country that do this, they have patients travel from across state lines, 4, 5, 6 hours sometimes, partially because of the scarcity, right? If there were more, they wouldn't have to travel as far. But because we're addressing a pain that they've been dealing with for years and years, they've spent more money and driven more miles elsewhere to get something that didn't work. And so when you tell them that it's going to cost about $1,500 to $1,900, it's going to take 2 visits. And if this works, you on average will experience an 80% symptom relief. That's huge. And when we look at, and I don't want to, throw any specific treatments under the bus, but just to add what we do in a new light is, when we talk about binocular vision, most people think of vision therapy. Okay, and vision therapy is widespread, but there are challenges, and we all acknowledge that having a patient be consistent with their therapy is a trick. Getting adults to want to opt in to vision therapy is almost impossible. So there's all these different things in the traditional binocular vision space that just isn't working for patients. And that's why not a lot of patients opt into it. And they continue to struggle with these symptoms year after year because the barrier to entry was too hard. So yes, you can, prescribe instantly Avalux, and that's a huge win for patients who are suffering from migraines or even considering prescription medication or a lens. I mean, what would you prefer? And in our world, it's like, okay, well, let's look at what the traditional options are for BV and getting these symptoms under control, and what we can offer. It's a radical shift. So, we're talking, instead of 8 months, we're talking 8 weeks. And instead of $5,000, we're talking under $2,000. And so when you ask a patient, what would you prefer? They give you the answer, and the answer is quicker and cheaper. And so, I think that's, how we think about it with the patient psychology, for sure.
Yeah. And Julie, have you seen something similar where patients travel to seek out treatment for your migraine specialty?
Yeah, we've had patients come around, upwards of maybe 100 miles from the Bay Area, from the foothills. They find
And in
us on the
California, 100 miles is also like 16 hours. So
Yeah. No one internationally yet, like kudos, Matt. But that's a great thing about these subspecialties. And I think neurovisual medicine does this really well, is like funneling patients to its participating practitioners. And now Avalux has a store locator, and they've got a great website. And so they're funneling patients to us as well. And what I worry about with my colleagues is like, their patients are going to start asking them for Avalux. And they're not going to know what it means. So that's one of the reasons, I'm here, is to try to get that message out.
Yeah. So it sounds like you get a chance. So if I'm summarizing why somebody would add a subspecialty to the practice, that's like this. It's kind of emerging. It's not like everybody's done it, so I'm just catching up. It's I'm on the
Leading edge.
almost bleeding edge. I'm on the edge. You were on the bleeding edge. I'm on the edge now. But the idea is that you get an opportunity to position yourself as a leader amongst your community, right? Amongst your community of patients, but also amongst your community of peers. It increases obviously your referral business, and it also creates this opportunity for you to capture a patient that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. How did you do? How did you start building referral business? Your referral business, Julie, and Matt, for you, I think kind of question on deck is what do you recommend to practices in terms of contacting other providers?
Well, I won't claim to be an expert in this. I think that's actually a need in our practice, is to really be intentional about, communicating to the broader audience. So yeah, I'm going to put that on my to-do list, but I will say, like, when you add a subspecialty and you get that pride, of being that early adopter, it adds this extra boost of enthusiasm. I really feel that this translates into better, culture, better staff retention, and that in and of itself is going to promote and drive your practice and drive the patient experience. And then, I mean, it's like, I don't necessarily think the referrals, I don't think it's rocket science. I think it's just doing the right thing consistently, right? And so, like, when you have a success, is just looking the patient in the eye and saying, like, it has been so rewarding to help you with this problem. I'm sure know other patients or friends or family, other people, excuse me, who live with migraine headaches. Would you please let them know that we're here and that we can help? And I will say, actually, now that this comes to mind, we did have one of our patients who drove about 50 miles to our practice, and she was super plugged into like migraine, like support communities. And she has been singing our praises. I think she sent us 9 patients so far, but like she's been singing our praises on her Facebook migraine support group. So like they talk. You live with migraine headaches, like you're talking to others with it. Like you're looking for solutions. You don't want to take, like Matt mentioned, that pharmaceutical that is expensive and recurring and, lasts maybe 9 months and has awful side effects. Like I have so many patients on migraine meds, and they're like, yeah, it's sort of managed, but like then I have to take an antiemetic because my migraine meds make me dizzy, and it's just like on and on and on. So this is just super fulfilling. Like at the end of the day, what Matt and I and like a lot of these subspecialties, like same thing with dry eye, or when you're fitting a keratoconic patient in a scleral, like it gives you all the good feels.
Yeah, because you're helping with a problem that they've had for a while, and you're able to offer a solution that nobody else has given them. Matt, referral programs is going to be my last question here. Zoom in on some of the things you recommend to practices when they're building their subspecialty and how they build referrals.
Yeah, so I can definitely, and I can do it for both Julie and I. I can't do it for everyone in every subspecialty because there's something unique about solving a medical problem as an optometrist. Okay, when we're solving some of the specialty-based symptom treatment solutions, when we're tackling things that are specifically eye-related and that don't really bleed into their everyday other symptoms, it's tricky to build a referral network, period. It's a lot harder than when you have migraines, which is also associated with neurology. When you have dizziness, that's easily associated with ENTs. When you've got vestibular issues that could be correlated to either an ENT, an otologist, a vestibular therapist. So my favorite thing about neurovisual medicine and treating patients with functional vision issues is that the symptoms they have are not obviously visual. And so when that's the case, they've been everywhere because there's not an obvious first choice that knew how to solve their problem when they're at our door. And so a lot of patients that come in are on an anti-nausea medication. They're on an ADHD medication. They've already been treated, and the differential diagnoses that they have been given span the gamut. And the worst one that I'll throw in there is perceptual persistent dizziness, PPD, or postural dizziness. It's a psychological diagnosis to explain dizziness that no one else has figured out. We figured it out. And for most patients that come in with it, we give them a functional solution because we're able to address the functional system in a way that no one else has before. So I would say, like, and I will just pick up where Julie left off. When you talk to that patient and say, one, I'm so happy you're feeling better. It makes my day, and this is why I do it. And two, who the heck did you see before? Please write their names down so I can reach out to them and educate them on what we did today, right? Who is your care team?
That's great.
Who else provided you care? Because that, in a marketing, sphere, is your list. And now you get to educate them and let the outcomes of your clinical work be the content of your marketing.
I love that. I think that's really interesting and insightful advice, Matt. Okay, so I'm gonna, I think, pause this conversation because in reality, my guess is that our listeners are going to reach out and ask for more details on many of these things. I'll post information about both of you in the show notes so that people know who to reach out to if they're at all interested in these subspecialties. Or learning more about them. We may do more shows. I reserve the right to bring you both back together or separately, depending on listener feedback. But I just wanted to ask each of you for a final thought. What's the biggest thing that you would want to share with someone about building a new subspecialty in their practice, and or maybe the biggest learning that you've had over time? Matt, I'm going to start with you.
Ooh, this is a good one. Let me see. I think there's two things I would say. One is a clinical element and one is a patient related element. So on the clinical side, I would say that binocular vision, as it was presented to you, this, if I'm speaking directly to optometrists, if I say BV or prism and your blood sort of like curls and you're not feeling great about it, know that there is a much more straightforward, step-by-step approach that you could leverage to make the difference for your patients. But the question is why? Why would you? Well, the answer is they're everywhere. And the minute you start looking for it and talking to patients about it and listening, the minute you're going to find that 1 in 5 people in your 20 patient day who need this care. And even if it's not you, it could be your associate or a colleague down the street, but this stuff is everywhere. These symptoms are everywhere. And you have the opportunity to expand your scope just by asking patients about these symptoms, uncovering it, and deciding to do something about it. And we're here to help with that.
Yeah. Julie, your final thought for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, adding a subspecialty, it's another way to differentiate your practice. You're going to add a cash pay service, and every optometry office is different. And so you always want to consider, like, again, the barrier to entry. So, what is going to be involved in this? But I think prescribing Avalux fits in well if you have a large group practice, because again, you can kind of maximize that single patient encounter. But it could also work really well if you're like a concierge single doc practice and you just want to sidestep the whole insurance hamster wheel and you want to provide better care. And you're gonna, you'll be impassioned and your staff will be inspired, and that's going to lead inherently to more satisfaction, more, retention, more referrals. So like, to me, it's a win-win. It's not that hard to do. Like, I know we are all busy, but if you're not evolving, you're stagnant. And so I challenge optometrists, like, go to those conferences, ask those questions, listen to podcasts like The Power Practice, and like, keep learning, because we are in such an awesome place where we get to connect with patients and see them, at least, in the most case, on a regular cadence, and get to know how they use their eyes and what their lifestyle is like, and we get to add value. So being an optometrist is great, and this, the subspecialties just makes it better on so many levels, and it's profitable. And I got to think about the business side. I have a duty to be profitable to my employees and my patients. So yeah, no brainer. It's not that hard. Like, run, don't walk.
All right. Well said. And thank you both for being on the show today. Great conversation. I hope we're able to help our audience open their minds just a little bit into what's possible with other emerging subspecialties. Again, grateful to have you both on the show.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you. If you're enjoying the Power Hour, you might be asking yourself, what can I do today in my practice that's going to make an impact? So over the years, the practice coaches and consultants at the Power Practice have helped thousands of practices improve. And they often start with one thing, and that's a proprietary methodology called the Practice Profitability Audit. For about $2,400, they look at all of your practice numbers and they stack them up against where a practice of your size could and should be. It takes about a week for them to do. And because they're so experienced, they know what your potential looks like. And they're often able to take that $2,400, multiply it several times over, and hand it right back to you in found profits in your practice in months, not years, in months, but you get to keep the much more profitable practice for years afterwards. But here's the best news. I'm going to tell you how you can have the practice profitability audit completely free. See, we're really trying to get people onto the show website, which is, by the way, powerpractice.com. And then you click the Power Hour podcast button. The reason we want you there is because I want the audience participation. I want to hear your feedback, and I want to know how to make the show better for you. So you can interact with us, send us your feedback, offer your suggestions. And for a limited time, when you go there, you can also request a practice profitability audit for free. Right. We're going to cover 100% of the cost, but only for 5 people per month. And 5 people per month is all we really have capacity for, because this is a resource intensive audit and the Power Practice coaches are generally busy serving their clients. But for 5 people a month, they've agreed to cover 100% of the cost. So it's totally free to you. So again, take action immediately in your practice. Go to powerpractice.com, click on the Power Hour podcast, interact with us, but also request a practice profitability audit today.